Out there, I have the honor of introducing Mr. Jared O'Leary. Jared is the Director of Curriculum and Professional Development at BootUp. He describes himself as a multiplicity with experience facilitating and designing a multitude of classes in subject areas in all grades from kindergarten to graduate level. In his role, he creates 100% free elementary coding curricula and oversees district-wide professional development. To learn more about him, visit his website at jaredoleary.com, and I'll post that in the chat. I'm going to take myself off stage, but I will be monitoring the chat. So, and I'll come back on about near the end to take any questions and facilitate the next parts of this.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So hi, everybody. It's a little weird kind of just talking to myself, but knowing people are listening, watching. I generally prefer to make these kind of sessions more of a dialogue. So if you do have questions that you want to post in the chat, I'll keep it up along the side. And if you want to request to like jump on video, audio, we can ask questions that way. Just a quick disclaimer. My wife likely has COVID and I'm showing symptoms of it. So I'm really out of it. So I'm going to be drinking tea. So my apologies for that. And I might need to run to go help her if she needs water or something. So today's session is on project-based learning with Scratch. And it's kind of broken down into two separate main chunks. So the first chunk is just kind of talking about, well, what is project-based learning? What does this look like in computer science education? And we'll kind of talk about the continuum of projects. And then the next half of the session is exploring some projects that I have created with Scratch. There's a ton of free resources that I'll share with you. And then at the end, the plan is to spend time specifically on Q&A, dedicate for that. However, again, if you feel like you have a question that you just want to ask in the moment, please feel free to do so. I will try and monitor that. Thank you, Brenda. I appreciate it. Okay, so to get to the resources that I'm going to be talking about, I just posted a link in the chat. Or you can go to my website. There's nothing for sale there or anything like that. But it will take you to this page, which has the presentation slides that I'm using. And all of the pictures and like the books and the things, the resources that I'm going to talk about, they're all links. So it'll take you directly to each one of these resources on here. There's also a playlist. It's got 43 videos of what my classroom looked like and links to additional resources and whatnot. So for example, these are all links on my website. Like if you want some Sonic Pi resources or some Swift resources or Scratch, whatever, it'll take you there. There's also the CSK8 podcast. If you want to listen to that, there's a bunch of resources on there. And the most recent episode, I Can't Breathe, is it's got a lot of valuable resources that I think we should all go through in support of Black Lives Matter and other movements that are going on right now to combat racism. So I highly recommend checking that out. Okay. So again, link is in the chat and I'll post it again at the end of this session. So we're going to start off with a conversation on, well, what exactly is project-based learning and what does this look like in the classroom setting? So I'll read this out loud just in case you're unable to read it. So project-based learning is built on the idea that real-life problems capture student interest and provoke critical thinking and develop skills as they engage in and complete complex tasks that typically result in a realistic product, event, or presentation to an audience. And the source for that is down at the bottom, so you can click on that and it'll take you directly to it if you want to read more of it. Okay, so let's talk about 5 kind of like pillars of project-based learning according to the authors at the bottom of this page. So there's a scholar, John W. Thomas. He describes project-based learning as 1, it's central to the curriculum. 2, it's organized around driving questions that kind of like lead students to encounter central concepts to different principles of a discipline. 3, it's focused on a constructive investigation that involves inquiry and knowledge building. 4, it's student-driven in that students are responsible for making choices and for designing and managing their own work, which is an important part. A lot of people, when they do project-based learning, they don't think of the student-driven side of things. And then the 5th pillar of this is that it's authentic. So by posing some problems that occur in the real world and people actually care about. So for example, right now, like two big ones off the bat is combating racism. That's a big one right now. And obviously COVID is as well. So those are two that you could potentially address through project-based learning, or at least work towards addressing. So think of projects and project-based learning is it fits along this continuum. So on one end, we have what I'm calling like a fixed end of the curriculum or continuum. And then on the other end is the open end. So let me kind of talk about each side of this continuum. So as an example of what this might look like, my background's in the arts and in music and whatnot. So I'm going to give you this example. So if you think of an art walk, like, you know, when you walk into a library or walking through your school hallways and you see art on the wall, you might see an art walk that was engaging in project-based learning, but it's more on the fixed end of the continuum. So like every kid in the class has to make a tree, and you have to use a checkered background with these specific colors, and your tree needs to have like maybe 20 limbs, and you have to use these colors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. On the other end of the spectrum, there's the open end. So it's, okay, we're going to engage in a medium. The medium might be painting, or it might be drawing, or it might be sketchwork, or maybe some combination of all these different things. And you're going to create something that's interesting to you, or that relates around a theme or a topic. So we see like a hot air balloon. We see like looks like a countryside or farm, etc. So these are two forms of art walks, but it's very different ends of the project-based continuum. And I think it's important to point this out at the very beginning before kind of diving deeper into, well, what is project-based learning? So on the, excuse me, on the fixed end of the continuum, we have like an example in computer science. It might be, okay, class, I want you to create a game. You're going to have one player sprite, and there's going to be 3 enemy sprites. You need to have at least 2 if-then blocks, so conditionals, and you need to have at least 1 variable. So this is an example of what it might look like in computer science class or a coding class. So projects with this kind of criteria are very easy to assess and evaluate using rubrics or check sheets. So you can just be like, check, they've got a game, cool, it's got at least 2 if-then blocks, etc. However, it might result in the previous slide where like all the projects basically look the same or very similar in terms of everybody's painting a tree, essentially. Okay, so now on the other end of the spectrum, we might have open questions. So for example, can you create a school-appropriate project that helps someone? Or one that is scary, funny, exciting, boring, musical, silly, relaxing, colorful, solves a problem you see in the world, reminds you of a special event, story, or place you can give as a gift to someone else, or maybe it's something that you can use for another class. So in these open-ended projects, there might be very little to no explicit criteria mandated by a teacher or a facilitator, as the projects are often kind of posed by the kids who create them. So such an approach to project-based learning can be difficult to assess or evaluate, and even facilitate at times. However, the projects are often more meaningful as kids are kind of able to create things that are interesting to them. So again, these are kind of just two ends of the spectrum. Let me take a second to see if there's any questions in the chat. Thank you, Ellen. I'm glad you like the website. Lots of like hundreds of hours worth of content on there, all free. Okay, let me highlight one important thing on here, and it's at school appropriate. So I always included this at the start of projects. And whenever a kid was engaging in something that was questionable, whether it was school appropriate, what I recommend doing is asking a question like, hey, would you be okay if the principal came and saw this? Or what about a younger like sibling or an older relative like a grandparent or another teacher? And just kind of posing that question can help them reframe, oh, maybe I shouldn't do a project about this, but I should do something that I'm also interested in that is school appropriate. Okay, now somewhere in the middle is what I'm calling like a flexible kind of project. So a flexible project kind of has aspects of both the fixed and the open. So for example, you might be able to do something like create a flexible project that says, what type of project can you create that includes at least 2 if-then blocks and at least 1 variable? So it doesn't have to be a game. It could be maybe like a choose your own adventure story, or maybe it is a game, but everybody's game is going to look different in terms of how it comes out. So another example might be, how can you create a game that keeps track of a score? So this is a little more specific, but it doesn't necessarily say how they're going to keep track of that score. You might not even need to use a variable to do that. Or another example might be to storyboard and create a superhero or heroine project that uses several different types of event blocks. So these are all projects that kind of lie somewhere in the middle of a fixed project and a more open project. Now, if you are going to engage in storyboarding, which I highly recommend when engaging in projects, because it kind of breaks things down into chunks that kids can use to kind of build off of, or engage with modularity or functions, or however you want to think of this. Here are some example like prompts that I used in a superhero or heroine project. So the idea of these questions was to kind of like guide students thinking from like upper level, like what kind of sprites are going to be your superhero? What kind of like superpowers or technology will they have? How will they transform, et cetera, et cetera. So thinking big picture, and then narrowing it down into some more specific questions. So like basically what's going to happen? Who are they going to try and save or do? And what kind of danger are they in, et cetera. And then getting into more specifics, like how will people be able to interact with your project? So kind of starting with big picture and narrowing your way down can help out with creating these kind of projects. It's something that I recommend. Now, one of the things that you can do when engaging in storyboarding, when doing project-based learning with platforms like Scratch, is you can also color code things. So you can have kids go and like highlight stuff. Like green would be, hey, I know how to do this part. Fantastic, no questions. Yellow might be, I might have a question for yourself or for like a peer in the classroom. And then red might be like, I know what I want to do, but I have no idea where to get started with it. And so using this kind of approach can help out with, okay, just quickly glancing at the storyboard and going, okay, they understand the majority of this project, or they don't understand the majority of the project. So just a quick tip for you there. Okay. So while storyboarding might be helpful for young coders who are working on a project, I'd like to now discuss some frameworks that teachers can use who are interested in developing these projects. So for example, the author cited at the bottom of this particular page, the screen, recommends choosing a worthy topic that is not only interesting to students, but has long-lasting value and meets curriculum requirements. So next, they suggest situating learning within real-world contexts and positioning students as potential participants and contributors to differing coding practices. Then they encourage creating generative questions, which are like driving or essential questions that are open-ended, not necessarily easy to solve, and can generate multiple pathways of learning, or encourage deeper thinking, encourage thinking across different subject matters, or even like create a need to know, something like that. And it needs to be something that is relevant and meaningful to not only the kids, but also to their learning experiences. So the fourth step is on developing critical thinking and cultivating different dispositions. So for example, incorporating multiple perspectives when designing or creating a project, learning how to ask questions or make informed decisions, determining how parts and wholes are related, or comparing, contrasting, predicting, etc. You could even have them like identify what is known and engaging when they are playing or experimenting in this project, and then gathering and synthesizing information to kind of solve problems. And these problems can be like within a single discipline, or it could be multidisciplinary, which is actually what I tend to prefer to do. So next, step 5, deciding the scope. So you need to be able to determine the depth and breadth of a project. So by asking questions such as, how ready are the kids for this kind of project, or this concept or practice that we're going to engage in Scratch or in any kind of platform. And then you also need to ask, like, how comfortable am I as the educator or facilitator in the room with it? And then kind of go from there in terms of, how can we fit this into the existing school schedule? So that's when you're deciding your scope. Then the next thing that you do is actually design the experience. So this is going through and kind of sketching out a narrative. Like, what do I want kids to learn from this? What will this look like? How will people learn from this experience, etc. And so, again, this is just one framework for doing it, and it's something that I highly recommend. Now, I'm going to very briefly highlight 3 more frameworks that kind of align with that project continuum. So on the slide, again, if you click on this, it'll take you to the actual book. It's not an affiliate link or anything like that. So this book by Wiggins and McTighe, or McTighe, I don't know how to pronounce their last name, so one of those is probably wrong. So backwards design, this approach that was popularized by the book Understanding by Design, this is more on the fixed end of the spectrum, typically speaking. So with this kind of approach of backwards design, you tend to start with identifying what are your desired results. Then you go into the big ideas, which are like the core concepts or practices within a subject area that the kids need to learn and know. Then you get into the enduring understandings, which kind of summarize the big ideas that cannot be understood simply by like seeing or hearing. And it must be uncovered by actually doing the subject. So the enduring understandings are the things that are done while you're engaging in computer science or coding practices. So then the essential questions kind of get at both of the big ideas and the enduring understandings. So the essential questions can focus on a particular topic, maybe it's a problem or even a field of study, and are the kinds of questions that are discussed in the field and not just in schools, which is an important thing to note. Like the kinds of project-based learning that are encouraged in this book and that I encourage are projects that can be situated outside of the classroom, as opposed to, hey, this thing is important because you need to get a grade. So it needs to be something that has some kind of an impact and is something that people are actually engaging with outside of the class. At least that's my opinion. Okay, so the next section with a backwards design is determine the evidence. So this is kind of figuring out what is the evidence that's needed to kind of demonstrate that understanding of the desired results, the first step. Then once you've determined the evidence, so like how you're going to assess or like what kind of projects people are going to create, then you actually go in and plan out the learning experiences. And we could spend an entire like graduate course unpacking this. So this is, again, just a very brief highlight of this. If you want to see what this approach actually looks like in terms of standards and essential questions and things like that, the National Core Art Standards actually does a really good job with this. So if you click on this link in the PDF, it'll take you to that, and you can explore that while I'm talking about the next book. So the next book by Linda Darling Hammond, this is an inquiry-based approach to projects. And this is more in the flexible side of things. So it kind of borrows from both fixed and open types of projects. So let's talk about the like 5 stages that they include in this particular book. So the first one, the vision stage. So this involves envisioning the kinds of questions and investigations that like might get at the overall objectives and competencies. Sorry, tea break. Throat hurts. So once you've kind of created your vision for this, the next section is to plan out the inquiry by determining how to hook students. So this is trying to get them hooked through like a scenario, maybe a question, brainstorming, even like planning out what kind of misconceptions kids might have, and then thinking through potential like rubrics or forms of assessment that you might use. So step 3, the build stage. It involves planning out the sessions and the collaborative teams that are going to go on, gathering resources and kind of planning out different processes and products that kids might use. So like for me, when I was still in the classroom, like gathering resources would be, okay, if kids are going to make this kind of a game, what are they going to need to know to create a score? What are they going to need to know to create player controls, things like that. And so I'd kind of find all those resources, bring them together. The Showtime stage, this is basically like sharing with other people. So this is like the art walk, or I'm going to have everybody post on their website, the class website, like the projects that they created, or have like a coding night where parents come in and get to see all the cool things that kids created. So that's the Showtime. And then the transition stage is thinking back to, okay, reflecting on what did we learn while engaging this and where are we going to go next to this? So that's the transition, according to the authors for this book. So on the far end of the spectrum with like the open projects, we have a book by Hellman Katz. This one is actually, I believe, for pre-K and K, but it's applicable. I've done this with graduate students, so it works in any grade level. So again, this is on the open end of the spectrum. And there are kind of 3 phases to this approach. So the first phase involves determining the possible topic, which can result from like a shared event, such as like a field trip or a voiced curiosity by one of the students. Like one of the examples they give in the book is like, why do we hear fire trucks driving around? And that kind of led to a project that they all explored with, well, what do fire trucks do? What do people who work as fire people do, etc. Or it could be a topic that's initiated by the teacher. Like if you have a theme that you have to do, you can insert that theme as something to discuss. But the discussions are not top down in terms of it's not the teacher saying, hey, everybody, you all have to learn this thing. It's more of kids kind of generating questions around that theme, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, please let me know. Again, I'm really out of it. So the next phase, phase 2. So this is planning and investigating the topic. So the authors, Hellman Katz, they suggest that this is like a cyclical phase where you're kind of creating new questions and collaboratively generating them throughout the investigation. So this is just a continuous process until you get to the final phase, which is like an event that determines whether or not the project goals have been met for what you're supposed to be learning. Now, this sounds very familiar to the inquiry-based approaches. However, it's important to point out that the questions are generated by the students, regardless of if you are the one creating the topic. The kids are the ones creating the questions around it. And they might go in directions that you hadn't necessarily planned for, which is something that happened all the time when I use this approach with different grade levels. Okay. Now you might be thinking, okay, this is cool and all, but what about like if I have this sequential curriculum where like I have to do this thing and then the next day I have to do this next thing? I've been there, done that, and quite frankly, I didn't like it. But there are ways to do this. So let's say you see a class 5 days a week. So maybe you can make it so that the first 4 days are going through that sequence. And then on the 5th day, this is like your 20% time that like places like Google are famous for. Your 5th day is, okay, take what you learned in the last 4 days, apply it into a project that is interesting to you, whether it be a game or a story or whatever you can do. And then as you continue to go throughout the year, every Friday, you're still adding and building and layering on these new concepts and understandings with what you're doing. And the goal is to revisit throughout the school year. So I want to show you an example of what this looks like. Oops. This is all sick. And go. Okay, cool. It's a white screen now. I should have preloaded this. My apologies. While we wait, we can watch me juggle a single ball again. I'm real good at it. Been practicing. Oh, thanks for sharing that, Katie. Yeah, if you have questions while we load, or we can all just sit here practicing twiddling our thumbs or something. It's fun.
Jared, did you load it from a tab, or is that an application window? Sometimes if you put it to a separate tab and then load it, and it does better. It froze.
Load in the background.
Okay. So hopefully we can get him back here. Thank you so much for your patience, and we'll answer those questions as soon as we can get him back in. I know, poor fellow. April, you're so right. Jenny, when I was working in a K-6 school district, Scratch, we would send permission forms home for parents to sign, noting which softwares we'd be using for the year, and they could opt in or opt out. We generally didn't have much of a problem with that. So I'm going to send him an email offline here. While you're waiting, he has pinned his presentation to the top of the chat window. So if you haven't seen that, you might want to take a moment to look through that. The presentation is there, and it links you to his website as well. Thank you, Katie, for sharing the Scratch resources from his website.
Okay, so the joys of technology. Uh-oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I said we were entertaining ourselves. I'll let you have it again.
Okay, my apologies for that.
Not a problem.
All right. Okay, yes, thank you, Vicky. So that project that I was going to share, apparently, it gave me a virus, which is appropriate. So this is a project that a fourth grader created, and like after the weekend, be like, check out this cool thing I added. And if you want to experiment with it, the password is 1987 to get into the computer. So what I was going to demonstrate was if you click on the Google icon, then it takes you to a simulated search engine that he created. And if you type in download virus with like a space in between, it'll add a virus right here on your screen. And then when you click on the virus, it like gives you a bunch of pop-ups and whatnot. It's hilarious. So the point is that, excuse me, this idea of revisiting throughout the school year, this fourth grader in particular would come back every single week and just add something new to it. And there's so many like hidden gems in this. So you can have fun experimenting with it. And in the actual presentation slide deck, when you click here, it'll take you directly to it. But Vicky sent the link, so thank you for that. And if you want to actually see a video of this fourth grader talking through what he was doing, it was, sorry, 1987. I'll type it in here just in case. It's a reference to Five Nights at Freddy's because he was a fan of that game. You're welcome. Okay, so if you want to see a video of Victor talking through this, it's almost 12 minutes long and it's fascinating. Again, it's a fourth grader talking through this project that he just kept adding to every single week. And there's several more videos on there to check out. And go to the next one. as well as some examples of some of the 2nd through 8th graders that I work with. So some of these projects are super simple. Some of them are much more complicated and took multiple months, if not years, for kids to work on. So those are things that you can explore. Speaking of exploring, we're actually now going to explore Scratch projects. So now that I kind of talked about the project continuum and what does project-based learning look like, et cetera, now we're going to talk about what this looks like in Scratch. So the resources that I'm going to share with you are on kind of like more in the flexible side, but some projects lean more towards a fixed thing where it's like, hey, create something interesting with these 10 music blocks. Or more on the open end of the side of thing where it's like, hey, create an animated card for an event, like whether it's historical or a birthday or whatever. The resources that I'm going to share with you in a moment are going to take you to a page like this. So these are all 100% free. You don't need to sign up for anything. But the first step in all of these is basically to access Scratch. So when you click on this, it'll take you directly into Scratch. And again, I'll show you the link to this in a second. So just watch this real quick. And if your computer is faster than mine, it'll actually load it. And if your computer is at my pace, then maybe by the end of October, it'll load. Once you load into Scratch, every step underneath this in the sequence will take you to some kind of a resource. So as an example, in this maze game that I'm demonstrating, the second slide is a video that I created where I walk through how to create levels in Scratch inside the editor. So I'll appear in the corner of the screen. I'll walk through every step of this process and show you exactly how to create stuff. So these are kind of the resources that I wish I had when I was still in the classroom and created stuff like this. Goal is to make it easier for you. If you don't want to watch videos, if you have like an intermediate experience with Scratch, you kind of know the ropes, you can actually just go to slide 3 and beyond, and it just summarizes what's going on in the video. It doesn't necessarily explain why you want to do things that are explained in the video, but this is just a very quick summary of here's the next step. Cool, you did that. Now go to the next step. So once you finish whatever is in this visual guide, cool. Now you just go on to the next one. So now let's talk about player controls. And so you go into this resource. Again, it has a video where I explain what, why, how, all that stuff. Or you can just go down to the next section and go, okay, here are different options for player controls. Here's number 1, here's number 2, number 3, etc. And it talks about why you'd want to do those. If you happen to finish a project sequence that you're about to explore, there are extensions. These can go in any order that you want. So if you want to learn how to add variables in your project, cool. It shows you how to do it. If you'd rather figure out how to solve some bugs, there's at least 3 for every project that you're about to look at. And the lesson plans actually give multiple answers to those bugs, but this resource does not. And then there's also like an example project. So if you want to see what does this project look like when it's completed, every single one of these has some kind of a worked example that you can actually go look in the code or just try out. Like, okay, you can move your character with your arrow keys. When you touch the wall, it resets back to the beginning, etc. Okay, so this is the resource that we're going to explore for the session. Now, to get to this, you're going to go to this link. Whoa, not my downloads. That link, and you're going to click on any of the sections that say code or resources. So if you're going through this and you're like, no touching, you watch this video and you're like, oh, that's interesting. Click on this purple one that says code or resources, and you're going to go through each one of the steps and you'll learn how to basically create your own version of this project. And right now there's over 40 projects, I believe, in Scratch on here that we're going to explore. And in about 20 minutes, I will share the next thing that we'll do, and then we will kind of like wrap up with discussion at the end. So I'll put this up here. If you have questions about any of the resources that I'm sharing or anything like that, you can either ask them in the chat while you're exploring this stuff, or you can request to add your audio and video, and you can like verbally engage with me and just maintain the 6 feet distance, because like I probably have COVID as well. So And while you're doing that, I am going to scroll through the chat that I may have missed. Oh, what kind of tea am I drinking? Actually, I don't know. It was made by a friend. It's a concoction of herbs that are supposed to help with breathing and whatnot. So it's many different things. Okay, Jenny, how does the school district address the under 13 privacy issues with Scratch? Do they have parents sign permission slips? Yeah, so a lot of the districts that we work with, they'll have like these generic technology permission slips that can be used. However, some of the districts that we work with that are, some of the districts that we work with that are particularly sensitive to technology and like EULAs and things like that, they prefer to use the offline version of Scratch. So with Scratch, you can download an offline version that prevents them kids from having access to the community, which is where like the 13 and under issues come in play. So I highly recommend downloading the offline version. And it's also just good to have, like, especially if you have internet issues like I did earlier, if servers go down or whatever. Let's see. Thank you, April. Yes, we are not feeling great, but I'm glad I'm able to at least do this session. Yeah, if anyone wants to be on screen, come join me. We can have a dance party. And I see there's more people who have joined. So the thing that we're doing right now is we're going to this link. You're clicking on the links for projects that look interesting, the ones that say Coder resources, and just follow through each one of the steps, starting from number 1. Just keep going through it sequentially. When you have questions about these resources, then you can join on the screen or you can post them in the chat. Yes, thank you, Pete. Yeah, the Scratch, gosh, I can't speak. The Scratch Classroom, the teacher accounts are very helpful. And that link that Pete just posted is excellent. Thank you, Brian. I will say I did CSTA a couple years ago and had a wicked sinus infection and like almost passed out during one of my sessions. So I'm doing better than that, despite the fact that I probably have COVID. Yeah. I've been hospitalized five times from sinus infections. So, April, my wife works in a hospital. So odds are we got it from there. Just like the surgical masks just really don't do enough. Does something, but not enough. Thank you. I really appreciate that, April. Oh, good question, Victor. So the little post-its, if you right-click somewhere on the stage inside of Scratch, then it allows you to add a comment. So let me show you how to do that. Thank you. So if I'm creating a project that's like super cool, the most complicated thing ever, this one, you can click on any block that you want and then just add a comment, and that allows you to put the post-it note there. So the thing that I personally love to do when creating projects is to kind of share, here's what this function does. and then ask questions that encourage kids to remix it. So like, how could you make it so that, how would you change this if instead of this sprite being a cat, it was a cow? What would you do differently? Or how could you make this more interactive? So instead of when you press the green flag, you like press a key, or maybe make a loud noise by like clapping or something. There are ways to do that with Scratch. Do we have a pin to a Google form to input our info so that we can get our PD certificate? Yolanda, do you know the answer to that question?
I do not, but I will find out.
Okay, thank you. Cool. I'm glad that helped, Victor. April, a new feature for the comments? No, they had it in Scratch 2.0 for a while, but most people don't use it. I highly recommend it. And you can expand and collapse them and whatnot by clicking on the little triangle. But I use it with all of my projects. So like on my website, under the Scratch page, under the Scratch resources, it links to my old account. And so like when you go to this old account, which there's a funny beatbox thing on here, all of the projects that are in here that I've shared, like this beatbox machine, when you click see inside, it has comments explaining stuff. And then again, it always ends with like questions, or almost always ends with questions that's just like, hey, how do you dive deeper? What could you do to make this more interesting? And if you haven't checked this one out, this one's a fun project where you make funny faces by drumming with your fingers or pressing spacebar and then making a beat. Which there is a version of that on the BootUp page. So Project 13, if you want to do that, check that one out. On here, so the lesson plans, if you click on it, it tells you how long recommended for it, which we'll actually explore that in 12 minutes. But Elizabeth, if you want to sneak peek at this, there's more content in these lesson plans than you could ever want. And there's a ton of resources in here. So when you get to the actual project sequence in the project work, it tells you here's about how long I'd recommend to do just this chunk of time. And for each one of these, it says like, okay, to add the letters as a sprite, it should take you at least 6 minutes, give or take, depending on your kids and familiarity and all that stuff. When you get into the extensions, it does this as well in terms of like, hey, if you want to learn how to do some reverse engineering, spend about 10 minutes on each one of these examples that's in here. Or if you want to provide time for kids to learn more, maybe spend another 30 minutes or at least one more class doing that. So the lessons will help with that. Can I demo the sticky note again? Of course. Okay, so you're in Scratch and you've made this super awesome thing, and let's make it even more awesome by, yeah. Okay, so we're going to rotate 36 times 10 degrees. Cool. So all you have to do is right click either on the block itself if you want to attach it to it, and then you say this is what this project does, and then ask a question. Or you can just right click anywhere on a screen and just kind of like post your sticky note anywhere you want. I personally prefer to attach it because then it has this little line that says like, hey, here's the specific thing for this section. Or if I want to be like, hey, here's what this particular function within this sequence of code is doing, you can use that. Okay, so Angela, excellent question. And it's actually something that we are going to explore in 15 minutes. So if you go on this page that I shared with you and you check out under the curriculum tab, there's a Scratch Junior tab, and that's specifically for like pre-K or K through second. And there's right now, I think 54 project examples on there. It doesn't have the code of resources where it like walks through every step of the project, but it does explain how to create these projects. Yeah, so over 50 projects on here. Sequence from like simple to more complicated stuff with multiple pages. Oh no. Yeah. Elizabeth, yeah. Just right click anywhere on the stage or anywhere on a block in Scratch and it'll allow you to do that. Yes, Vicky, that is an excellent idea. It's a practice that I recommend. So if you have kids like in here, the last step for every project sequence is to add in comments, and it actually explains how to do that. Thank you for reminding me. I created a resource for that. So everyone who has comments, questions, to check this out. It shows you how to do it. It's the last step of whatever project sequence you're working on. And I encourage kids to specifically do this to explain what's going on in their code. Great way to assess things. I'm going to pour myself some more tea. Let me know if you have more questions. Now, just kind of vamp on this page, the Coder resources, that's like the student facing resources for kids. And even shared this with like homeschooling parents and kids who just want to use them at home. This allows you to be like, hey, pick one of these first 3 projects. Number 1, number 2, number 3. You can go at your own pace. They walk you through how to do stuff, how to recreate every aspects of a project on there. Or you could be like, hey, kids, pick any one of these projects on this page, click on the Coder resource for it, and you can go at your own pace on any one of these. This is the kind of stuff that I wish I had when I was in the classroom. And the reason why is because like, I don't know about where you're all at, but my districts were highly migratory. So I had kids just every week, brand new kids in my classes. And so if we were all on step 5 as a class and somebody came in, and I've had kids who literally never used a computer before in 8th grade, they need to start on step 1 or step 0. And they're able to do that using these resources. So it allows you to go at your own pace. The kids who want to go ahead, cool. You're going to get to the extensions much faster than everyone else. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah. Okay. So Vicky, that is a good point. So when you are in Scratch, there's an ability to use a backpack. So the backpack kind of allows you to store some scripts in here. So for example, I think this is player controls. Yeah, using the microbit. So this code right here, if a kid just like dropped it into it and you were to see this in their project, you'd be like, wow, that's some really cool stuff. Someone's calling me. Sorry. Cool. This is great. You made it so that you can like tilt your microbit and now your character is going to move around the screen. Fantastic. And then you go, how did you make that? Or what does this specific condition do right here? And then they'll just kind of look at you like, and they have no idea sometimes. So the comments make it so that you can be like, okay, even if you're dropping in code from other people, which like using Stack Overflow and like other things, it's a common practice, but you need to know what's going on. So right click, add a comment, actually explaining what's going on in your code. That way kids aren't just kind of dragging and dropping and crossing their fingers, hoping it works without actually understanding what's going on there. And this backpack thing, it only appears when you are signed in. Now there are some more tips. Let me show you. If you've gotten through some of the sequence so far in these resources, at the end of the project extensions, there are 2 folders at the last 2 links. So the second to last link, the one that says learn even more Scratch tips, when you click on this, it takes you to a folder that has a ton more tips, like how to use a backpack or how to create a timer with variables or remove backgrounds from your images, et cetera, et cetera. And then if you have a microbit and you're interested in using that, like I demonstrated with the moving the sprite, there are some tips on like, how do we make it so that we can switch scenes with a button or turn a microbit into a mouse or like use the player controls like I demonstrated with a microbit. Those are in every single one of the project extensions as the last 2 links. Okay, what is the most efficient way for students to share projects with you? I have used Google CS with booklets and everyone had weird passwords. Okay, follow-up question for you, Elizabeth. when you say share them, do you need to be able to show them with other people, or is it just sharing with you so you can assess them and take a look at them? Okay, so the way I did it, and I actually kind of talk about this on my website under publications. There's a assessment considerations, a simple heuristic. It's the top one, at least at the moment. I talk about the types of assessment that I use, summative, formative, and ipsative. And so these assessments were going on throughout the year. And so what I would do every single class is it might be like 1-2 minutes, maybe 5 at most, of me showing something on the board. And then, all right, cool. Everyone go work on your project. And while everyone was working on their project, I was just constantly circling around the room and asking kids, okay, where are you at with this? How does your progress on Thursday relate to the goal that you set on Monday? And how does it relate to what you learned in the past? And so I was constantly looking at projects that way. And when a kid would finish their project, I had them, man, my throat hurts, take the URL and they would copy it after they've shared their project using the orange share button. And I'd have them paste it into a Google form. And then that way it would kind of like document, here's the link to the project. They would explain something that they learned through this project, how it compares to their prior understandings. And then they would write like what they want to work on next. And so this was something that I could share with an administrator who was like, well, that's great that you're doing all this formative assessments and whatnot, but I want to be able to like compare projects over time. And so using the Google form, it allowed you to do that with a spreadsheet. Sorry, my throat's giving out on me. You don't need to apologize. Thank you, though. This tea is really good. If anyone else is drinking tea, cheers. Mm. Yeah. So, Chris, the question is, do you use studios? They're good at looking over time. Yeah, so I love studios. So on my old account, I used to share like some exemplar works and I would arrange them into studios like Story Studio, a game studio, or things like that. You can also like assign everybody in the class to a studio and say like, hey, everybody, you need to share your amazing maze game in this studio. Excuse me. And then you can share the link to that studio to the class. And then the class can go in and look at other people's projects and ask questions and give comments, which can be done asynchronously. So I highly recommend doing that. But one of the things that I also recommend is like at the end of every class, I'd have one half of the room go to the other and they'd kind of ask questions and share what they learned. And then the next day they would flip. So they were constantly seeing each other's works. But a studio allows kids to see across grade levels. So whenever a kid was working on a project, like a second grader could look at a project that an eighth grader had created. And I personally really valued that. Share, ask question on stage. Yeah, anyone want to join me? Just stay 6 feet away. Limeade. Oh, strawberry soda. That sounds interesting. Do you ever use the videos from CS First lessons or produce my own? I always produce my own. And that's just a personal preference with it. Because like I'm the one creating it. It's the way that I would have taught it and whatnot. And that's nothing against CS First, which if you, what is it, cs-first.com or .org? No. CS First with Google. This is a wonderful website. Highly recommend it. Lots of cool stuff on here. So if you haven't been to CS First, there's a ton more resources that help you out with Scratch. It was originally designed for like after school stuff, but they've since like revamped it for in the classroom. Red grapes juice. I haven't had that in a while. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So April, that's a good point. In the lesson plans, which, oh, sorry, got dizzy. If we all go back to this page, I'm going to interrupt your scratching. So my apologies. I mean, technically, I can't force you to stop. You can just ignore me. So instead of clicking on a code or resource for whatever project that you're just looking at, take a minute and check out the lesson plan with whatever project you're working on. And when you go to it, it's got like multiple pages of stuff that might be useless to you, but administrators love to see. So it's got like here are all the scratch blocks and vocabulary and objective standards, yada, yada, the boring stuff. If we actually go to the project sequence, this takes you into like your preparation materials. Like here are things that I recommend before you actually do this lesson, or things to learn more. Then we get into the getting started. Okay, so let's talk about like how you could potentially demonstrate this project with the class, give some suggestions for logging in, and then cool, we actually get into the heart of things. So kids don't ever have to see the code or resources. You could just go up and like teach this stuff and just use the lessons that are in here. I've actually been in the classroom, so these are all based off of those experiences and my understandings of educational research and whatnot. So if you just follow through this stuff, then it will step by step tell you everything you need to know, how you can teach, how to add color effects. It even gives you like explanations. Like if you are brand new to Scratch or CS, coding, whatever, like, and you don't know the difference between change and set, cool. This thing right here will help you with that. And here's a video where I explain and demonstrate the differences between them. And then I give like examples for how you might be able to facilitate this. And it does this for every single step on here. So it's more information than you could ever possibly want or need. And that's by design. And if you happen to get through all this stuff for a project, well, cool. There's suggestions for project extensions, for differentiation. It has the debugging exercises. And again, it has, here are the questions that are asked on the student side of things, but you actually get the answer. So when you click on it, it shows you what the code is supposed to look like. It points to where the error is, and then it explains what it should be. And sometimes it gives multiple answers like, hey, you could solve it this way or this way or this way. And all of them work for different reasons. And then it gives you just like suggested questions, kind of like to guide through these processes. So, and a lot more. Tons of information on here. It takes a long time to make, and I'm constantly developing more. So like right now I'm working on a social studies with ELA standards, with coding standards, in particular for the Eastern Shoshone and Northern Arapaho tribes on the Wind River Reservation in Wyoming. So those projects will be coming out down the road with that. So if you haven't, take a look at some of the lesson plans and just kind of peruse the resources that are on that are inside of there. And there's a ton. So that's our next thing. And cool. And if you haven't done so already and you're interested in the Scratch Junior stuff, there's an entire page with over 50 Scratch Junior lessons. And again, to get to that, you just go up to the curriculum, click on Scratch Junior. And now all of these are Google Docs. All of these are free. You don't have to sign up for anything. And you, in fact, can actually go into this file. You can download your own. If you are signed into Chrome, you can actually make a copy of this and then modify it to change it to do your own stuff. So if you want to get rid of all this front material that like if your administrators don't care about that, cool. Just go in and delete all of that on your own copy of it. Thank you, April. Thank you, Mark. For my personal taste, the lesson plans have more information than I need. So I would personally go in and delete a lot of the content in there that I wouldn't want. But that's just me. Okay, so yeah, Q&A. So I know this is not professional, but I've been drinking a ton of tea and don't feel well. I'm gonna run to the bathroom real quick, so I will be right back, and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the very end. Apologies for that. Yes, Vicky and I have met over the years and conversed and whatnot. Vicky's an awesome person. Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you, Ellen. I appreciate it. Scrolling up. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Yolanda. Oh, thanks, April. Yeah, everything that I've done on my website, I have dedicated many weeknights, weekends, breaks to create these resources. And the reason why is just because I knew that teachers, being one, we were busy and not having kids or anything, I wanted to be able to create the resources that would help others. So everything on there is free, no affiliate links or anything like that. Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, any questions? And if you don't, on my website, like later on, if you're like, hey, I was going through this resource and I had a question about it, just you can press the contact me button. Oy, dizzy. And just fill this out. And then that'll go straight to me. Oh, okay. So, Angela, don't need to apologize. You go to the publications, and then it's the first one, assessment considerations. It's a quick article. It's not very dense or anything. Whereas like the next one, that one's a dense one. And there's a couple other there. Like you can read my dissertation. You can read a thing that I wrote on coding, encouraging project-based learning, stuff like that, as well as like presentations. So presentations I've ever done, as long as like there's permission from the people I'm co-presenting with, you can see all the resources on there. Any one of these takes you to the resources that are used in it. So like this one, individualized learning through rhizomatic design. When you click on it, it takes you to like the actual slides, and as well as like this has some relevant lectures and things to learn more with it. So once it ever actually loads, explore. There's a ton of content in there. Dr. O'Leary, you're funny. Yeah, it's not a type, but yes, technically. Thank you, Maria. Oh, thank you, Vicky. Yeah, the podcast has been fun. And if any of you want to be a guest on the show, contact me. Every Monday, new episode. Interviews come out every 2 weeks. And then in between that, there's a Unpacking Scholarship episode where I kind of dissect educational research and say, here's what it actually means in the classroom, or at least some practical suggestions and whatnot. So you can find that here, CSK podcast. Cool. Coding and dance. That'd be fun. April, you're funny. Vicky, I'm glad you like the Unpacking Scholarship ones. Those are fun to make. I feel like because I have a background as an educator and as a researcher, it's like we need more people who are kind of actually reading the research and applying it into K-12 setting, or at least making those connections or considerations. So I have fun doing that. No one wants to join me on the screen, ask a question? I'll keep my distance. Yeah, application of research doesn't happen. There's this interesting disconnect, between what's going on, research into things, and what like is actually going on in the classroom. And there's that gap. It just doesn't make sense. And if you look at like educational experiences across the country area, there's all these things going on research wise that say like, here are suggested practices, here's what we're learning. And other countries are applying it, like some of the Scandinavian countries, and then they're doing really well. And in not applying a lot of the research, and we're not doing well, and we wonder why. Vicky's getting voted. Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, if nobody else, I'm sure there's other sessions going on right now. You can jump into theirs, say hi. Or you can just look at me, but I can't look at you. It'll be awkward. You can dance for 15 minutes. Yeah, we can dance. Let's dance together. You have to come on screen, though. You got to request to share. Okay, what is a multiplicity? Okay, so I refer to myself as multiplicity. It comes from discourse on like identity. Idea that the identities that you bring to the table at any given moment shift depending on the context and environments that you're in. So for example, the identities that I'm bringing right now are like former classroom educator, or a researcher, scholar, like things like that. These are all things that I'm bringing to the table, a curriculum developer. But
like where I live.
If I were talking to my neighbor, I'd probably bring into it like where I live, or the fact that,
hey, are we gonna dance together?
Things like that. So that's
yeah.
Hey, are we gonna dance together? Yeah. Appreciate it.
We got Vicky sharing a project.
Oh, we got Vicky sharing a project. Let me see what actually loaded for me.
Oh,
Whoa,
I was excited.
that was exciting.
Man, I don't know why my Scratch isn't really loading for me.
To join for the dance, or are you here to kick everyone out?
So I got like one go-to move.
It should be done.
So we have about 4 more minutes, and it hop in will automatically kick everyone out.
Oh,
I'd love to see Victor's unplugged activity with the choreography there.
Yep. Code.org has some dance stuff. Yeah, and the lesson plan. Where is it? Links to unplugged experiences. So if you go down to the extended learning, and there's this master list, and it has 100 unplugged lessons and resources, over 100. So if you click on it, it just takes you to a spreadsheet that gives like a brief description of the stuff that's in it. And so this is just a curated list. These aren't unplugged lessons I've created, but if you're interested in it, hopefully your internet's fast as mine. It'll eventually load. So I recommend
Elizabeth,
that.
he did all the heavy lifting. Jared, you are a superstar. I hope you feel better soon.
Thanks. Me too.
And with that, everyone, make sure you check out the link that Jared pinned at the top. I've reposted the link for the form, the Google form, and I'll do that one more time. So that if you need to get credit, it shows what sessions you were in. Jared, again, I appreciate you so very much. And with that, I'll let you do the sign off.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry, I am nowhere near 100%. I appreciate all the kind words, and I hope you are all staying healthier than I and are doing well, despite all the turbulent times we're in.
Thank you. All right, everyone. April says, if you were at 100%, I agree, April, because those are so many wonderful resources there.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys in the next session.
Thank you.